All right. I think we're live. Push one in the chat if you can hear me. All right, I got a confirmation from the chat. Thank you for that confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 587, Black Blockchain Talk. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab. If you want to engage in this discussion, there'll be a link in the chat for you to click on. When you click on the link, make sure you raise your hand so that one of us can acknowledge you and advance you to the panel. Let me grab that link and then we can get started. And all right, let me share my screen. So we've been talking about blockchain for a while in terms of supply chain management, okay? And the necessity to actually have a system like this for any organization in any country, to handle the logistics aspect from a real-time digital infrastructure, digital transformation perspective. And so I'm pulling this article from the IEEE. I'm a member of IEEE here, so I have access to this article and have legitimacy to use this, so fair use, just as a fair warning. And so let's talk about blockchain for critical pharmaceutical industry to counterfeit drugs. And one of the, I work in pharma myself. One of the things that we see is that in Africa and Latin America and in Asia as well, Central Asia as well, there's a lot of counterfeit ibuprofen, HIV treatments and things of that nature, things that are very critical. But now with COVID, we're seeing a lot of counterfeit, fake, false drugs, things that are, they may say that they're treatment for COVID, but in reality, it's really this, powdered sugar or something like that. It's nothing really substantial. And they're making a lot of money off of the black market on this, selling these sort of counterfeit drugs, millions and millions of dollars in this market. And so I want to go over this article so that we can actually engage in this this discussion, because I think this is a really good article. All right, this is from IEEE, PharmaCrypt, blockchain for critical pharmaceutical industry to counterfeit drugs. Let me expand this out. The research analyzes the impact of counterfeit drugs on the healthcare supply chain industries and evaluates the solutions currently in place to reduce the number of counterfeits coming to the market. Feedback information obtained from the industry professionals is used to build requirements for PharmaCrypt, a new blockchain-driven tool. This is really dope. The presence of counterfeit medicines within the healthcare industry is evident, with 1 in 10 medical products in developing countries being substandard or falsified. Do not meet the standards of safety, efficiency, and quality. Falsified medicines can contain incorrect ingredients and doses or show no presence of the active ingredient. This means that there are millions of patients unaware that they are taking medicines that fail to work as prescribed. Not only do they fail to treat individuals, but some counterfeits can cause serious illness or even death. A modeling exercise developed by the University of Edinburgh estimates that 72,000 to 169,000 children may be dying each year from pneumonia due to substandard and falsified antibiotics. Counterfeits are a huge commercial drain for individuals in healthcare systems, and in some cases can lead to further financial burden on the healthcare system if the patient consequently requires treatment. The healthcare industry is rife with counterfeit drugs, which infringe upon the intellectual property rights that penetrate the industry supply chain. This is due to a complex supply chain compounded by a lack of visibility or the product's end-to-end journey. The effects of falsified and counterfeit drugs have the potential to cause devastating consequences. The complexity of the drug distribution supply chain makes it difficult to prevent counterfeits infiltrating the industry. There are numerous companies involved in the supply chain where drugs change ownership between manufacturers to distributors, repackagers, and wholesalers before reaching the patient. There is little or no visibility between the parties involved in the supply chain to track the authenticity of the drugs. This causes a level of uncertainty for patients and disparities concerning authenticity of the products sold at the end of the chain. There are currently several solutions to this problem. But as the sophistication of the counterfeit products and packaging rapidly improves, they have flaws and limitations. Some solutions endeavor to trace transactions of the products as they move through the supply chain and change ownership, although there is still a central organization present that is at risk of being compromised, whereby documents can easily be falsified. Also, a central system is prone to a single point of failure. Solutions like our proposal could potentially be adapted to include the anti-tampering and distributed database capacities of blockchain. The proposed solution presents a blockchain-driven tool that can be used to record and timestamp the transfer of goods at each point in the pharmaceutical supply chain. As the drug travels through the supply chain, every transaction of goods will be noted and timestamped by scanning the barcode. The ledger will be used to ensure the security and safety of the product. The threefold contributions of this article are as follows: analysis of the problem and a demonstration of whether using blockchain could be a better solution to the supply chain of the drug than the existing solutions. Design and creation of an application tool that can be used to record the origin and contents of the drug manufactured and timestamp the transfer of goods. Provide recommendations based on the tool's functioning as to whether and how using blockchain technology is the best way to solve the problem. Sorry. This is the background study. This section discusses the problem domain in greater depth and highlights existing solutions and evaluates their limitations. We will also deliberate as to why a blockchain solution could be an improved idea compared to the current solutions. The pharmaceutical supply chain is the means by which prescription medicines and delivered to patients. Ingredients for medicines are normally sourced from a variety of places before reaching the final formula. Once the final formula is achieved, the drug can be distributed. During the supply chain life cycle, the drug will transfer among many different entities, specifically between the manufacturer and the patient. Every transaction offers an opportunity for counterfeit or falsified products to penetrate the supply chain and the industry. Figure 1 shows a typical supply chain scenario in the pharmaceutical industry. So we'll go to figure 1 real quick. This is figure 1, typical supply chain. You have the suppliers go to the manufacturer, and from the manufacturer to the wholesale distributor, which then goes to the pharmacy or the hospital, which then goes to the patient. But in between the manufacturing process and the distributor to the hospital, there's a repackager, which would probably brand or create generic based drug, then go back to the wholesaler, and then from the wholesaler, go back to the second distributor, which is probably an external pharmacy versus internal pharmacy for the hospital or the provider itself. And so it's a very simplistic way of doing things, but between supplier, manufacturer, wholesaler, repackager, wholesaler, distributor, and pharmacy, no one has any visibility as to what's going on here. Okay, there's no visibility. So lack of visibility plays a significant role. Let me go back up real quick. The role of wholesalers is to make the process of purchasing pharmaceutical drugs a simpler and more efficient process. Wholesalers connect and deliver to thousands of pharmacies and dispensers. This saves manufacturers effort of dispatching drugs to pharmacies individually, because instead they can send large batches of medication to a relatively smaller number of wholesalers. Once the product is in the hands of the wholesaler, it can provide a range of services, including the drug distribution, electronic ordering service, and repackaging. The final entities in the supply chain are pharmacies and hospitals. Pharmacies account for approximately 75% of the prescription drug market, whereas such non-retail providers as hospitals comprise the remaining 25%. Pharmacies and hospitals purchase products from wholesalers, and then they are sold to the final patient. The wholesaler problem primary wholesalers have direct distribution contacts with the manufacturers they purchase from, whereas secondary wholesalers purchase products from a range of other parties, shown as by the arrows between the two wholesaler figures in Figure 1. It may not always be obvious whether a company in secondary or primary wholesale. For example, a primary wholesaler, let me advance engineering canvas. For example, a primary wholesaler may not only purchase products directly from the manufacturer, it may also purchase the secondary wholesaler depending on the demand for certain medicines. Buying and selling between wholesalers are common within the industry, and products move between a variety of different companies and can be repeatedly repackaged by each wholesaler before reaching the patient. In a process called sading, counterfeit drugs can be merged and confused with legitimate products at the wholesalers. This can be unknowingly caused if, for example, a wholesaler purchased from a secondary wholesaler company that has accidentally purchased counterfeit goods. During the repackaging process at the wholesaler, the counterfeit drugs may be given genuine labels. Manufacturers initially deliver medicines in fraud protection packaging. This can be removed during the repackaging phase, and batch numbers may be reprinted. Drug diversion. Drug diversion occurs when drugs that have been authorized to be sold in one country are sold in another. Criminals take advantage of the segments in the supply chain where products leave a documented chain of custody, and they can implant falsified goods. Markets that trade in diverted drugs usually have a little oversight from authorities and are known as gray markets. So this is important because countries that are on the US blacklist, like Syria, Iran, Yemen, Somalia, Sudan, those are the countries where a black market underground organization is looking to infiltrate these areas so that they can grab hold of these medicines or these goods so that they can actually sell them for high prices on the black market in their own countries, because the people there actually need it. The patients actually need it. Okay, Viagra is like one of the #1 counterfeit drug products, not even ibuprofen. Okay. package. In an attempt to reduce the impact of counterfeit drugs, several pharmaceutical companies have adopted a more sophisticated packaging approach. One of these approaches is to use holographic technologies. The concept is that a patient will know if the product is legitimate when he or she sees that the packaging contains a hologram. A major advantage of this type of packaging is that it can be applied to every individual item. This type of packaging can be costly to implement depending on the complexity of the hologram. Holograms can also eventually be cloned by counterfeit companies, making the original secure packaging ineffective. Another disadvantage of this solution is that it does not offer companies intelligence for when a counterfeit product penetrates the supply chain. Mass serialization is a technology used to identify the track objects. Used to identify and track objects and individuals using radio frequency waves. Manufacturers can use radio frequency identification, RFID, coding to allocate packages with unique identifiers. As the product makes its way through the supply chain, the product's information is captured by a chip reader. The chips can be disguised within the large batches of products to avoid tampering. However, RFID is costly to implement because the RFID tags themselves are expensive. There are many types of systems that include varied readers and tags, creating compatibility issues. Another concern with the technology is that it has the potential to be tracked and information on the tags can potentially be altered. Mass encryption technology, software-based mass encryption technology, can be used in the pharmaceutical industry to fight against counterfeit drugs. The same software is required to decrypt the digital code. This technology requires a large database server to store the data. This is where blockchain comes in, okay? Engineering cannabis, can you hear us?
Yeah, I agree. We've been talking about this when we talked even when the cannabis industry, when we talked of quality control, and even with the agriculture, when we talked about basically removing the farmer in there, and we just talked of RFID. Though it's expensive, these are the technologies that's even coming through. And there's one aspect I want to even talk currently that's happening that's important. That I think blockchain would have been perfect. This is currently the White House is having a problem with the CDC. Currently, they're looking CDC the pandemic data that's supposed to be given to the CDC. It's now being directed to the White House. And now CDC, there's a problem because CDC can't have access to the data without it going to the White House. And now everybody's saying if it goes to the White House, how do you know it's basically not going to be tampered with?
Secret Service.
That the Secret Service, but how are we sure the results or the data coming from the White House isn't changed, or are they removing data? So there isn't any trust coming out from the White House because the data usually didn't go to the White House. It usually went to the CDC, and then CDC distributed the data. So again, my mind went to blockchain. If you could secure that data, even though it's been transferred into, because the problem is they said they didn't have a central database system to distribute data. So I don't have a blockchain system built in the White House where now it's a trusted system that can distribute data at that point. So, and only that only basically signal that the importance of what data is in this economy right now. That data is so important that they have agencies fighting each other. CDC and the White House are fighting each other just for the data, to access that data and the trust from that data. So again, blockchain would have been a way to secure that data and say, hey, it's in a trusted system that has not been tampered with and can be distributed at any time. So again, these are the ways we should be looking at how blockchain and every AI is going to be utilized right now.
Yeah.
and for this article, it's just especially in the pharmaceutical industry for quality control. Blockchain is one of the best application for quality control, especially right now with a lot of contamination, and with even with COVID coming in right now. So blockchain will be the most, I think, the excellent technology to implement, especially during quality control.
Well, that's let me finish the article real quick, and then we could chop it up after. The Falsified Medicines Directive (FMD) is a European Union directive that aims to ensure that medicines in the EU are safe and a trade of them is properly controlled by including a unique identifier and an anti-tampering device on the package. As the product goes through the supply chain at various points, it is mandatory that the bar code is scanned again. This aims to certify the authenticity and trustworthiness of the medicine supplied. The unique identifier on the packaging must encompass a product code determining the medicine name, common name in pharmaceutical form, strength, package size, and package types, serial number, batch number, and expiry date. Manufacturers were required to comply with this EU directive beginning on the 9th of February 2019. Table 1 shows or displays the pros and cons of the current solutions discussed. So let's go to the top. So the solution is packaging. The pros is it is easy for patients to determine whether the drug is legitimate if they see a hologram on the packaging. The cons are it is expensive and can be cloned. The origin of fraudulent products cannot be located. Okay. Mass serialization. It has the ability to track and trace. Chips can be disguised in large batches to avoid tampering. That's the pro. The con is it is costly, has potential to be hacked, and has compatibility issues. Chips have the potential to be tampered with. This is true. You can wave a magnet over the chip and it's pretty much finished. Mass encryption technology. Each batch is given a unique code. It is complicated to implement as a con. Okay. This is true. FMD. An EU-wide directive sets the standards for all manufacturers. Packaging can be forged and overseen by centralized authority that could be liable to attack. This is a con of it. And so all of these areas have their pros and cons, and at the end of the day, they're not very suitable for a globalized economy. Okay, if you have a globalized market, you have multinational organizations, none of these really secure the goods in transit to avoid being intercepted. So,
and the cost of implementation is going to be enormous because we're dealing with stuff that can be tampered with. So basically, you have to go back, redo the whole. So the cost in implementing some of this is just not feasible if you're a small company or a small drug. So it's not feasible at one point. So again, cost should be factored into this kind of technologies itself.
right. And so what would have to happen is they would have to have a standardized container for each and every drug or each and every, medicine or good, right? So they're all going to have to agree that this is the sort of container that we're going to use, and this is the sort of chip that we're going to use, and so on and so forth. There needs to be a consortium that actually everyone is on board, right? But in this regard, not everyone is going to be on board. Maybe Somalia, for example, or even South Sudan may not have the necessary framework in place to adopt such an initiative. Whereas Germany, France, and everyone else, they can adopt it because they're first world powers, right? So it becomes difficult. Maybe Nigeria might be a superpower on the continent of Africa, but outside of the continent, they can't keep up with westernized
standards.
westernized standards because they change and they're so complex.
And not only even now to not only implement it but to uphold it, how, because now you have to dedicate manpower in order to basically avoid fraudulent basically tampering. So again, you have to, it's money again.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be I'm not seeing a whole country dedicating more manpower to something they've seen fraudulent. They say, hey, it's fraudulent, it can pass.
Well, even if that's the case, they don't have the infrastructure to deal with it.
Infrastructure to deal with.
They don't
So
have.
that's, yeah. So
That's
that's
where.
a big problem.
Mhm. That's where people like you, myself, some of these guys in the chat, some of these people in the chat. That's where we come in as consultants, right? And we kind of lay out the digital transformation process for
Yeah.
that. So we
Yeah.
can, there's opportunity in some of these areas. Let me finish this up. Blockchain is a digital technology model that can be used to store data. It consists of a chain of blocks containing transaction information. It is a decentralized system where data can be shared across a network in an encrypted fashion. Before a transaction can be added to a blockchain, it needs to be verified by the network nodes using a majority consensus protocol, where nodes on the network agree that the transaction is legitimate. Any transactions that have, sorry, something's in my way. Any transactions that have been recorded cannot be altered or erased, and the full transactional history can be viewed at any time. Each block in the chain contains data, the hash of the block, hash value of the previous block, and the nonce of the existing block. Hashing is used to make integrity protected blocks together to create the secure chain. Every data block in the blockchain is given a unique digital signature that directly corresponds to the data in its block. If the data in the block are changed, the digital signature of the block will also subsequently change. A block registers transactions as they occur, and the blockchain increases in size periodically as new transactions execute. Once the block is filled, it is allocated a digital signature that directly corresponds to the string of data that in that block hash. The first block in the chain is, what's going on with this mouse? The first block in the chain is known as the Genesis block and does not point to any previous block. To link another block of the transaction data, the signature in the first block is added to the data of the following block. The digital signature of the second block is now partially dependent on the signature of the block before it, as it included in the data of the block. The process is repeated every time new transactions occur to create the chain. Ethereum is a publicly distributed blockchain network that provides users with the appropriate environment to deploy decentralized applications. The platform runs the smart contracts that have been set by the application developer. The Ethereum network is made up of a series of distributed nodes and Ethereum wallets. The distributed network of nodes is established when computers or miners join the network. The network does not hold any permissions to join, as the node with enough computing power is able to join the network. AWS provides cloud computing platforms. Amazon offers blockchain templates as a part of its platform, which provides users a simple way to build blockchain applications for businesses. AWS provides the ledger database behind the application that eradicates the need for the application owner to develop the complex blockchain network. The service offers two types of use cases: to track and verify transactions with centralized ownership, and to execute transactions and contracts. Sorry, just missed this part real quick. Two types of use cases: to track and verify the transactions with centralized ownership, and to execute transactions and contracts with decentralized ownership. Using the AWS blockchain template, an Ethereum blockchain network on the cluster made up of multiple instances within application load balancer, ALB, can be created. We have used the AWS platform because Its service makes it easy to set up, deploy, and manage scalable blockchain networks, which eliminates the need to rely on other expensive implementations. Oracle is extremely similar to AWS because it is a blockchain as a service provider. It allows businesses to deploy applications over an immutable electronic distributed ledger database. Blockchain not only offers users not only allows users to integrate with suppliers, customers, regulatory agencies, and stakeholders, but also provides a high degree of accuracy. It also offers a high level of security compared to the existing solutions. The immutable characteristics of blockchain is one of the main reasons for companies are starting to implement the technology. If a block is altered, it will unchain itself from the consecutive blocks. For an altered block to be accepted on the blockchain, it needs to be chained to the rest of the blocks. All of the nodes in the network work together to create a consensus about which blocks are valid and which are not. Users in the blockchain will be notified that data have been altered and will deny the change. The blockchain will then be returned to a previous state where all blocks are still chained together. Participating nodes in the network assign their own private keys that are linked to the transactions they make. The private key is used to create a digital signature, sign each transaction. Each node in the network is allocated a private key, which grants ownership to its data entry. So let me, there's some questions there. This is more from a, I think from a customer standpoint, this is probably what they're looking at for feedback. So let me get down to the nitty gritty of this. PharmaCrypt, okay. This section explains the experimental setup for the development of the proposed PharmaCrypt application tool using Ethereum blockchain, which is created using AWS. The tool interface can be seen in figure 2. So this is the image of it here. So basically, this application rides on top of the Ethereum blockchain. Okay, so you're able to scan the package, upload it to the to the blockchain network itself, and then it has a list of products that have been scanned, and you can verify it on the app on the blockchain itself. Very, very simple process. Very simple process. The network is used to create a smart contract where products can be created and transferred between accounts. The developed prototype of the tool has the following features: barcode scan. Handheld smartphone devices are able to scan barcodes and upload the information to the blockchain. Yeah, most of your new phones today have at least 12 to 16 megapixel cameras on it. My phone currently, my OnePlus 8 Pro has 48 megapixels, okay? This is a lot, okay? You're talking about microscopic sort of use cases for a phone of that, with a camera of that caliber. Asset creation: the application is able to create new assets when products first enter the supply chain. A product's information is uploaded to the blockchain and assigned a unique identifier number, which is what I mentioned earlier. Transfer of asset: when a product is moved on to the next supplier or entity in the supply chain, the application tool records the transaction. View scan products: a user is able to view all user scanned products. Performance requirements: the application tool scans barcodes instantly with no lags or glitches. Consensus should be reached in under a few seconds. Yeah, this is true. So the speed of the blockchain actually matters, right? You're not waiting, for an email to come back. You're getting a response almost immediately. So if we ship something from the United States and it lands in, Kazakhstan or something like that, we're not waiting a few days or a few hours or a few minutes. We're waiting a few seconds. Okay, maybe 2 to 3 seconds. This is going to be updated if the gods are all playing together well, in terms of network infrastructure and digital infrastructure. Security requirements: separate accounts for each user. Users are enrolled with business network accounts. Each password is at least 8 characters long and composed of at least one uppercase letter, a number, and one special character. And number 4, each user is operated using the least set of privileges required to do his or her job. Okay. AWS was chosen to create the prototype of the proposed tool. The overall software is hosted on a computer-based system configured with an i7 processor, 500 gigabyte hard disk drive, 4 gigabyte random access memory RAM, and Windows 10 operating system, and the required data can be fetched to a mobile application. The AWS blockchain for Ethereum creates a private blockchain network on the AWS cloud formation. The final network is made up of the following entities: 2 Ethereum clients, 1 miner running on Amazon Elastic Cloud EC2 instances in an Amazon EC3 cluster, on-demand EC2 instances in an internal ALB load balancer. The entire process of the proposed solution and building the PharmaCrypt tool is as follows. PharmaCrypt tool interface. As the functions of the application tool run on the smartphone devices are relatively limited, the user interface as shown in figure 2 will largely be the same for each company. Here, the user will be able to scan the barcode of the product once the barcode has been scanned. If the transactional data are deemed legitimate by the network, they will be automatically uploaded to the blockchain. Users of this interface will be able to view only the transactions they have scanned themselves. If the transactions is deemed illegitimate by the blockchain network, an error message will take over the screen. The error message will trigger a notification sent to the main computer based interface controlled by senior personnel. The supply chain management team can then investigate this product further. Number 2, key pair generation. AWS uses public key cryptography to secure the login information of the instances in the network, as shown in figure 4A. So this is figure 4A here, but actually it's at the bottom. I won't go into it right now. We created a key for the blockchain Ethereum network, which is used to sign every transaction over the network. The key pair must be created in the same region in which you wish to launch the instance. The key pair will be downloaded, and the file name is the name you specified with a PEM extension. Subnet security groups and rules. The Amazon VPC is used to define the virtual network where resources will be launched. An ALB is created requiring 2 public subnets to be configured, located in 2 separate availability zones, so different regions, right? You wouldn't put, when they say 2 separate zones, availability zones, you have one zone that's in Virginia, and then you have another zone that may be in California. So these are 2 different zones. A private subnet is also necessary for the container instances. The availability zone should be located in the same zone as the ALB, the load balancer. AWS security groups control the inbound and outbound traffic to your resources. We specify 2 security groups, one for controlling the traffic between the EC2 instances in the cluster, and the other for controlling the traffic between the load balancer and EC2 instances and bastion hosts. Thereafter, we have applied the following incoming rules to the group as shown in figure 4B. Allow all traffic from the load balancer security group permitting the load balancer to broadcast with itself and the bastion host. Allow traffic from the EC2 security group permitting instances in the security group to broadcast to the LOB and the bastion host. Allow SSH traffic from the internet protocol, from the IP address that permits traffic from the computer to the bastion host. The following outbound rules also need to be applied on the same security group. So this is basically talking about here is just basically configuring the ingress and egress of the network. And so I think this is kind of, yeah, so they're going into the implementation of this. This is where they're inside AWS's blockchain as a service, the BaaS. This is really cool stuff though. I don't know, engineering cannabis, you have anything you want to add to this?
No, this is real cool.
Yeah.
And also I would have thought there might be also a tracking mechanism for real-time data, especially for shipping or basically going where you're taking real-time data of the basically shipping log. So it's being stored on a blockchain too. So as it's traveling, it's taking real-time data. Again, that's why 5G is important. It's grabbing real-time data of how it's basically traveling your package or your big freight of drugs or any of legal drugs or anything. It's traveling, it's taking real-time data. And basically and also once it reaches its destination, you might have a private key that's set as longitude and latitude. So once it lands, private key accepts it. It doesn't. It basically either opens up or it says it's in the right delivery place or something like that, where it's also stored in the blockchain. So at that point you have that's one part of security. You have proof that it's being traveled. Basically, you can see it being traveled to the destination it's going to, and that information is being stored in the blockchain. And once it arrives, you can say, okay, instead of someone signing for it, you say the longitude and latitude already confirmed it's at its location and it's stored in the blockchain too. That's another level you can implement in that too. I believe it can be done.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me just finish this last paragraph because I think it's really a really cool part of it too. Compared to the Drudge Ledger by Huang, the proposed consumer-oriented application tool provides more controllability, a more user-friendly interface, added security through groups, and private network virtualization. The proposed PharmaCrypt does not require a certificate service provider, anti-attack service provider, and query service provider, which are the requirements for drug ledger. In other words, the proposed tool generates less overhead compared to drug ledger. A detailed comparison between the PharmaCrypt and the drug ledger is presented in table 2 in figure 7. Okay. Apart from this, a smart contract is using smart storage containers provided by or proposed by Hickelden and Jochin. Is based on a multi-signature wallet of 3 parties to process the payment and arbitrate disagreements. The application requires extra hardware and protocol implementation, which is time-consuming as well as inefficient. Similar to the approach by Mondale, the proposed tool is able to defeat tampering, spamming, physical layer attack, and preferential treatment. However, the fucking assholes, man. I'm sorry, there's some fireworks going off in the background. However, the approach by Mondale requires new sensors, their setup, and significantly larger storage. Large storage for the algorithms to run, whereas PharmaCrypt does not rely on extra sensors. Rather, it uses existing technology of scanning the barcodes. The only drawback of the proposed tool is that it may be affected by the service provider, services provided by AWS, because it is based on the AWS blockchain. A performance comparison between the PharmaCrypt and the drug ledger is shown in Figure 7. The system is used 64-bit Windows 10 with Core Intel i5 2.6 gigahertz, 4 gigabytes of RAM with Java. Yeah, this isn't. Yeah, this isn't really giving a whole lot of detail, but it is giving a brief of performance between the two. So between PharmaCrypt and drug ledger, you're seeing significant time difference between the two. And so PharmaCrypt is 50%, if not more, faster between the two in comparison. So I mean, it's a no-brainer that a blockchain is the solution here, right? But the real question is, how do you implement it at scale? Because it's very expensive on if you're a developing nation, this may not be the best solution because it's very costly. I mean, unless somebody else comes in and implements it for you, not a whole lot of countries can implement this, right? There's 54 countries on the continent of Africa, and there's probably about 24 more in Latin America that don't have this sort of transformation process even in place. Forget about blockchain as a whole. They don't have that in place. And so how do they take advantage of that? Well, that's where guys like Engineering Cannabis and myself come in. Okay. But that's all I really wanted to show. I mean, we're at the end of this right here. But it's shown that PharmaCrypt as an application for the blockchain, as a blockchain application, is a fundamental way of handling counterfeit pharmaceutical drugs, okay? I remember when Ebola broke out, there was a lot of fake prescription drugs out there to deal with Ebola on the continent. That was a big issue.
Yeah, the application it's something else. Again, I just talked about what the CDC is doing. You're talking about PharmaCrypt. I mean, this technology is gonna grow. It's gonna grow exponentially, and it's not only going to be applied in the medical side. It's going to be in shipping. It's going to be in mostly every sector. The ability to basically safeguard critical data. And if you think it's data is not important right now, just look again. I just mentioned CDC. They're not fighting about budgets. They're not fighting about money. They're not fighting about anything. They're fighting about data.
Yep.
CDC and White House are fighting over data. Now that's the key there, knowing that data is now more important than a budget or anything. That should tell you something right now, that data is growing, data is becoming, it's already been established, its value is greater than oil. Now its value is growing each day. Now the goal is now how to safeguard this data and how to validate the importance of that data itself. And that's where blockchain comes in play.
Yeah, because
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, because the bad guys are going to come for this, right? They need, I mean, it's just the nature of a criminal, right? They're going to go digital. So they're going to try to intercept all of this information and get a hold of these drugs if they can. Like I said, there's a lot of counterfeit drugs out there for COVID right now, running around the continent. So
that's one of the biggest issues that that a lot of pharmaceutical companies have are counterfeit and fake drugs, and I can tell you that's something that goes over. That's huge in Africa. We have it here, but that's big in Africa, big, and other parts in Asia as well. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely big there, and I've looked at different reports of extraordinary scams going on with all manners of drugs that are going on the continent. Anyway, go ahead, Cannabis. Go ahead.
Yeah, especially I've seen drugs in Nigeria right now,
Yeah,
cancer drugs, drugs for tuberculosis and all that. They have not been basically verified, and it's difficult to verify it because again we have the different
and the
shipments
packaging is
and
good, and the packaging looks
packaging.
really good. Yeah, the
Really good. The packaging is it can pass for any drugs, but the content of those drugs, the concentration, the chemical formula for those drugs, you can't validate that right now.
that's
For
right.
all
So
we
people are
know,
dying.
yeah,
So again,
for all we know, they could be selling Skittles, man.
yep,
Reese Pieces.
Absolutely, that's a fact.
No, no
That,
one. Oh, this tastes like
that
candy.
is a
Yeah, it's because it is.
yeah, it is brown sugar. It tastes of brown sugar right
that is
now. So
a fact.
yeah,
Did you guys ever see that movie Formula 51 with
um, Samuel
uh
Jackson.
yeah, you ever check that out?
Yeah, that was a good movie. Exactly,
And
exactly.
then he was selling some of his scam stuff as well.
Yeah.
That was Butterlade. Yeah, but anyway.
So yeah, this technology is gonna revolutionize not only quality control, but the
Mhm.
way we do store data and also the way we access data. Again, I always talked about how this is not only just one technology that's going to be isolated, it's going to be involved again with 5G, AI, and all that. This just blockchain. It's not just an isolated technology. It's going to be involved with again 5G, which I did try to explain with shipping manifest, how
Mhm.
you can use that to match your shipping manifest or
Or
your
you,
flight manifest itself,
or you
and
can
take
replace that with a smart contract.
smart, yeah, smart contract. And
But
I'm learning. I'm learning that right now. So it's the technology is it's something we all need to learn and understand.
and
And
the other
it's
aspect, sorry, I didn't mean
go
to.
ahead, go ahead.
No, the
It's
other
big money.
aspect, yeah, the other aspect is IoT. The
Yes.
containers that these goods need to be put in, these prescriptions need to be put into. The article mentions that the difficulty of all of these sensors not being compatible, interoperability. Well, you're gonna have to adopt a standard, right?
Yes. Yes. IoT technology. Again, you even said statement. It's not blockchain is not an isolated technology.
No.
It has to basically go in and adapt different technology. Again, blockchain, IoT, um, every 5G,
Wow.
AI, everything has to. It's gonna be. They're all gonna be interconnected.
Yeah.
And the goal now is for you can't study everything. I can right now. I probably only know three.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna go beyond that because I'm not. But the goal is to work with people who might not have you might not have the knowledge. I might work with Mike who has the knowledge of IoT or other aspects. So the goal is not to learn everything, but just to learn the one you're good at and learn it well
Yeah, but
and go
how?
from there.
Yeah, but see, and then the question now becomes, how do we create a IoT based container for every single drug so that we know where it's going, right? We can
Yeah,
have real time tracking, GPS tracking of
agree.
all of these drugs, from wholesaler to the reseller to the repackaging and to the pharmacy or the hospital, right?
Also,
There's a whole supply chain aspect that's behind
aspect
it.
of it, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I said you can use blockchain again as a validation code, where you utilize the GPS location as a validation to know where it's going, where it's coming from, and you have to use 5G technology because right now you're gonna have to take real-time data. Each time the shipment is going, it has to collect real-time data into the blockchain. So
Well,
again, it's
There's
gonna
no
be
doubt. There's no doubt. This is the answer. This is definitely the answer to it.
yeah, well, you can leverage an IoT based device with
yeah.
GPS or what's the Russian equivalent? GLONASS.
Hmm.
GLONASS is the other one. As long as it's bouncing a signal off of that mini satellite, that Q-based satellite that we throw up there, right? As
Yeah,
long as it's bouncing that signal off, we know exactly where all these drugs are going now. Before you
yes,
didn't
Exactly.
have that visibility, right? You didn't have that visibility with the old ledger, right? There was
yeah.
gap between the supplier, the
Hmm.
wholesaler, the second reseller, the
And anything can happen in between there. Anything can happen.
yeah, well, yeah, right. There's a lot of visibility gaps there, but that
Hmm.
blockchain removes all those visibility gaps and creates continuity start to finish. But we only get the continuity based on every transaction that's made, not in real time of when it moves on a container ship or plane or or on the ground through freight. And so if we create the IoT container where it can actually give us real-time
data
information that this is moving at 10 miles, 20 miles, 30 miles an hour in this location on this road at this time with this climate, so on and so forth, because different environmental changes can cause damage to the supply chain itself. So
at that point, now you have a trusted map showing, okay, this is from here, and it went here, and it's not being tampered with, and it's at its location. So at that point, a trusted system, a trusted drug system that also checks what's in the drug itself, and also a trusted system that tracks how it's going, its freight. Basically, that's a system that everybody would trust. So again, blockchain is a powerful tool. And again, you have everybody. I think everybody needs to learn at least one or two of these technologies, new technology, IoT, 5G, AI. You need to learn at least one or two, and get good with it. Then start meeting up with people who know more than you know in certain technologies, and partner up and go from there.
Well, we haven't even got into the aspect of AI, ML, and DL and RL, right? Reinforcement, deep learning, artificial intelligence, machine learning. We haven't even gotten to that aspect yet, right? We're still scratching the surface.
Because right now you have the data from the blockchain. Right. Now you can make a predictive analysis on where that shipment is going. You can make a predictive analysis what time it comes in. You can make a lot of prediction with those data.
Cost.
Even with the data with the drug itself, you can make prediction on, okay, this drug is basically right now with the CDC. Again, I've always said you can make prediction on how drugs can affect different human beings with enough data. You can detect what population has an adverse effect of certain drug. So there's a lot of data you can use to do a lot of stuff. The goal now is to validate it, and now you have blockchain that can validate that this data is good, and you're good to go.
Yeah. You look at the cost analysis. Maybe if it's delayed, that may increase the cost because of
logistics. Especially, I haven't looked at it in the cannabis stage. You can use logistics to see, again, cannabis has a shelf life. If you have a good cannabis from shipping, again, if it ever happens, if we have federal legalization and you're shipping cannabis from one country to the other, you can look at shelf life. How long can you predict with certain data that this cannabis, if it's shipped from here to South America, how long does it have to be still a good quality of cannabis? You can make that prediction with good data.
And now you're talking. Well, now you're talking drones, right? Drones dropping off those packages from the wholesaler itself, based on the prescription, right? Because the idea of a traditional pharmacy is going to be,
gone.
It's going to be gone because of robotics, right? We just looked at that Monday where you had this little MIT created this, this arm that could actually sort out a plug into an iPod headset jack. There's nothing saying. Amazon bought a company last year called Express Scripts, I think. Not Express Scripts. All Scripts or something like that. I forget the name of the company, but they basically automate the scripting, the packaging process for prescriptions. Okay, and it sends it right to the patient. So if you're talking about automating that process, and then you're talking about a drone coming in and picking it up somewhere in Africa and then dropping it down at a GPS location of a would-be patient, and there's a locked container there. The patient or the user takes out their phone, scans it with their QR code, it unlocks it because they have the private key versus the public key on the box itself, and now they have a authentic drug to aid their issue, right? This whole process has to be digitally transformed, right? This whole thing, it's not just one aspect of blockchain, but all aspect of the supply.
The whole process will be automated. Just imagine now the freight lands in, you have good freight. Now it's an automated truck that drives your freight to its final destination. Now the final destination reaches. Now distribution, a robot comes in and basically takes it and sorts it out to its different destination, and the automated truck again goes to this final. So it's the whole process can be automated and probably will be automated, where you have little or no human interaction in terms of
Mhm.
Yeah.
drug distribution and everything itself.
Yeah, this stops poor people from being exploited. Okay, poor
Yep.
people are the ones at the bottom who are always the worst impacted by this, and so they're always the ones going out and buying these cheap drugs, counterfeit drugs, because they can't afford the actual real drug.
And it'll also save lives. Like I said, I was watching this one program where there's a family. They were in Africa, but they were taking um, these these fake drugs, and they said they didn't have anything else to really replace them with, so they still kept taking these things. And I was like, wow. So I definitely know some of that goes on here in the United States, but we have a better way of checking it, a little bit better. But some stuff still slides through. There's no doubt about that.
Well,
But other countries really get do get exploited at a great deal, and lives are at the end of the line with this. So we'll see.
that happens even in the marijuana business. You have a lot of cheap, trash weed out there. This is the bomb kush, and you find out it's just some dirt.
Yeah.
It's Reggie, right? That's what they call it, right? If Complex, he'll know the proper terms.
Yeah.
That happens. But like engineering cannabis is looking at this. He's looking at this from a data science perspective, and he's saying we can trace all the way down to the strand itself and say this is the authentic stuff. This is
There you go.
the real stuff
Yeah.
right here.
There you go.
And that's why, again, that's why we need more people to be invested in this. These are the ideas that needs to be birthed and implemented as soon as possible. It's not, again, these are feasible ideas, and it's not hypothetical, it's not theoretical. These are feasible ideas I've seen. Again, again, I'll say this again. Everybody needs to be involved at least in one or two.
Yep.
Just pick it and run with it.
Yep.
It's difficult, but I promise you, once you run with it, you can see so many ideas that will pop out. You won't even believe what's going on. So run with it. You don't need to. Just need one or two and run with it. So that's all I'll tell anybody who's interested. Because again, I just talked about the CDC. CDC, they are now these are experts in the medical field, and they rely on hospital data to know what's going on with the pandemic, and they were cut off.
Mhm. I
And
wouldn't be,
that's-
I wouldn't be surprised if the CDC, NIH, and these other institutions have grants on the table for anyone who can implement a blockchain solution to solve some of these issues.
solve some of these issues because they don't have
Yeah.
a centralized database system that distributes data to every trusted data. Again, validated and trusted data.
Well, it's centralized now because it sits in the White House, right?
It sits in, it sits in the White, it sits in the White House, and everybody's pissed.
Yeah.
Everybody's pissed. So these are the kind of problems I see every day, and I say, why aren't we implementing this? This can be implemented and solve most of your problems.
And engineering cannabis like this, it would be pretty difficult to corrupt the data as well. Am I correct?
Because it's immutable. They
Yeah,
hash it.
it's already been hashed.
Yeah, it's been hashed, and now it will be I would say impossible right now to basically change that data. The goal is that's why it has to be trusted.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, if the hospitals are basically transferring data and data is basically being transferred into a centralized blockchain, which everybody can view, at that point, nobody has that complaint that, hey, it's going to the White House, and we don't know if the White House is going to give us the data or is the White House going to withhold some data or all that.
Well, they can manipulate the data, right?
Or to manipulate the data. So all that will be eliminated with the blockchain. So again, I don't know why it's not being implemented. When I saw it, I started laughing. I said, wow, this has blockchain all written all over it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I just kept my mouth shut and said, hey,
And the White House would be the biggest advocates to prevent the blockchain from actually being implemented because they want the data. They want to do what they want with the data. They don't want democracy. That's what blockchain provides is democracy. It allows all people involved or all parties involved to have consensus, and they don't want that. They want to be able to control the data. And so,
Hey, Mike,
yes,
even democracies don't want democracy.
oh yeah. Yeah, but to answer Nagon's question about whether or not the data is secure or can't be tampered with, yeah, because once the data on the blockchain is altered, it gets rejected from the network itself or from
There you go.
the blockchain itself because it's been once once it's been interfered with, the hash disappears and it no longer can be accepted, and so therein lies the problem. And from a pharmaceutical standpoint, this is this is important because we talk about cannabis a lot, right? Coming up with different solutions for using cannabis as a treatment for COVID and other symptoms and things like that, epilepsy and things like that. Yeah, you would want somebody to you would want a solution like this because you don't want everybody else trying to copy off your vaccine and things like that, off of your prescriptions and stuff like your drugs like that. Because if they can do it, then that's going to destroy the market for you too. So Black people have a vested interest in understanding all of this because they're the ones receiving the poor drugs, and then the ones who can develop it, they would benefit greatly from a blockchain solution like PharmaCrypt.
yeah. And anybody who thinks automation is not real or automation is not coming, just look at it. Just look at these articles, and just start combining these articles together. And I promise you, you can see where automation can just take over a whole industry, and you can see how quickly it can take over. You can see it from again beginning to source. If I tell you from point A where your drug is basically manufactured to point B where your drug is the final destination, I can show you how the whole process can be automated. And just by looking at the articles, you can see it. And again, it's coming. It's just up to you to know where you fit in and how to study. Again, blockchain is difficult, but again, if you start looking at it and start knowing how all different parts of a blockchain works, and know I don't normally. I always say look at the programming and all that, but most people don't like programming, so
Yeah.
that's fine. But look at how every part of a blockchain works, and see where critical information are basically stored, and go from there.
Yeah, let me answer this question real quick from Nicholas Parkinson. He says, what about the HIPAA laws? Because I know that stops healthcare info from being centralized. Not necessarily HIPAA laws in this regard, because of the pharmaceutical industry doesn't really abide by HIPAA to that extent. It's really the hospitals that do that, because pharmaceutical companies don't keep patient records or electronic medical records. They don't keep EMRs because they're not an institution that deals with patients directly. They'll deal with patients from a trial standpoint, but not from a doctor to patient relationship. They don't have that sort of data to store. What they're more concerned about is intellectual property, IP. Yeah, that's really the case for them. But even with HIPAA laws, as long as the data is secured in its when the data is at rest and when the data is in transit, that's one of the two major tenets of HIPAA in itself, the security or the securing of the data of the patient, the EMR itself, the electronic medical record. And so what happens on the continent, they still use paper over there. Okay, I understand that some people may think they're in the Stone Age, but they're not really in the Stone Age. They just don't have the regulations that the United States has. See, regulations what push the United States and Western countries into this sort of technological leap. Why they have to adopt digital tools and whatnot. On the continent in Latin America, they don't have those sort of regulations to abide by. So their mindset and their culture is radically different. They still use paper. Okay, they still use paper to handle things. But now with the phones that we have today, iPhone, Google Pixels and stuff like that, these phones have radically high powered cameras on them. Okay, 20 megapixels, 30 megapixels, 40 megapixels. You can scan a whole patient record that's on paper into the cloud using OCR, optical character recognition. Okay, and you can leverage that thing and it can blow it right up into an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. That's where we are right now. And that's what that PharmaCrypt actually does. It actually scans that barcode in those numbers and it actually throws it right into the blockchain. And then it figures it out for itself. Oh, Dr. Phoenix dropped a link in the chat.
Yeah, the application, especially again, you're right. Policies and regulations drive innovation, especially in the United States.
Yep.
They drive innovation on how to basically try to maneuver. How do we get HIPAA law? How do we comply to HIPAA law electronically? How do we get patient information distributed legally with the patient's consent and basically knowing that that's important to track the health of a patient? All these laws and all that makes innovation, makes us innovate ways to basically abide to the laws and policies, but also make sure we continue to innovate. And even though it's not, those laws and regulation doesn't apply in the continent, it's still, that technology is still going to be as useful in the continent as it's going to be useful in the Western world. Again, again, blockchain, they're able to safeguard information. If a pandemic breaks out in Africa, to safeguard that information, that critical information on how the pandemic is breaking out, how it spreads, how the infection rate goes in. That critical information is important to be placed in the blockchain where you can study it and look at it and see how that affects just that. Even with Ebola itself, if that breaks out again, that information is critically stored on the blockchain and needs to be examined. So
right.
these are important aspects of it itself.
Right. Dr. Phoenix was kind enough to go out and find these grants from the NIH about blockchain technology to improve care or clinical trial optional, right? So small business innovation research grants for the purpose of the funding opportunity announcement to solicit small business innovation research applications for commercializable blockchain-based products that aim to improve the patient process currently in existence with SUD healthcare ecosystem. So this is what we were referring to earlier. I kind of threw this out there, but I didn't know that they had something out there currently. And so Dr. Phoenix was kind enough to grab that. So thank you to Dr. Phoenix for grabbing that. I think that's pretty interesting. I wonder how much it is. $225,000 for phase 1. Interesting. Oh, $150,000. Okay. Up to $1 million for phase 2 awards. Yeah. So blockchain pays off. Okay. Yeah. This is going to pay off.
Yeah. I might start looking at that. I might start looking at that. Yeah. That's kind of money that can help fund some stuff. Whoa. Okay. Yeah. SBIR. I looked at it, but I didn't know NIH also had that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Look at the second one that he kindly went out and retrieved. This is from the NIH again too. National Institute on Drug Abuse. Blockchain technology to improve SUD care. The purpose of this funding opportunity announcement is to solicit STTR research applications for commercializable blockchain-based products that aim to improve the inefficient processes currently in existence with the SUD healthcare ecosystem. Yeah, blockchain as a service. We just got finished talking about that. Using blockchain to ensure the integrity of the medical records. Using blockchain to ensure that researchers follow through on submitting data, especially negative data. Using blockchain for patient recruitment and engagement. This is very common. Empowering patients through the the recording of consent decisions, tracking the prescription drugs in the pharmaceutical supply chain to the patient. We just got finished talking about this with PharmaCrypt.
Yeah, man, that's a lot.
Validation of payments or claims. Streamlining the negotiation process between providers and health plans, reducing the providers' administration costs. We just talked about costs too, right? As a part of that process. Value-based payment solutions. So based on their income driven, right?
Yeah.
So this is really good stuff. Thank you, Dr. Phoenix, for even throwing that out there, because this is
I need to look at this into that.
Yeah, let's go to Nicholas. He has his hand raised.
Yeah, Mike, what's going on?
Chilling, bro.
Yeah, Mike. So all of this stuff is going to need cyber, right? So I heard that you said that it's kind of specialized in certain things. So do you think you should specialize in like maybe machine learning, AI, or either blockchain, or just stick to cyber?
No. What we're saying is that blockchain is not an isolated technology, right? It is a subset of different technologies that's fourth industrial, right? So cloud, AI, machine learning, deep learning, reinforcement learning. We're also talking IoT, we're talking 5G, we're talking about edge-based computing, we're talking about autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, drones, all of these sort of aspects come into play when it comes to blockchain. So blockchain is more of an enabler of other technologies that are going to come out too, emerging technology that's going to come out. It's an emerging technology in itself, but it's also going to be tied in with all of these other things, because it has to be. It's just a part of the framework of going forward. So.
Okay, but even if somebody wants to get into like cyber, they should still like step into like the blockchain world. Or...
When you say cyber, you talk about cybersecurity.
Yes, cyber. Yeah.
Well, cybersecurity is only one aspect, right? Anybody can get into cybersecurity, with enough training. But from a blockchain standpoint, blockchain is very much a enterprise. There's a lot of sirens in the background. I'm not sure if you out there protesting with BLM or not.
Yeah, my bad. My window open. That's why.
Yeah, you might want to find.
Really, Mike?
I don't know, man.
Yeah, the police coming for me.
Yeah, I would hope not, man. Yeah, but the thing is,
BLM.
you can be a cybersecurity consultant and really look at an organization that might be looking to digitally transform themselves, right? CVS, Walgreens, all of these sort of organizations that are looking to advance, they're going to need a cybersecurity consultant to come in there. But we talked about this maybe about a month or so ago about the auditor. So, okay, the IT auditor plays a significant role in a lot of this type of stuff, because somebody has to be looking over the checks and balances of the books. Somebody has to be looking at the books. Okay.
Certainly.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, you have anti-money laundering, AML. That stuff needs to be looked at.
Yeah, and when you talked about just being one, I'm a data scientist. I do ML, DL, and all that. But with that, I also looked into blockchain, into IoT, and into, again, drone technology. And again, the goal is to, because I know all these play a part into any objective or any organization. Again, the goal is to know that all these technologies are connected, and the goal is to at least have a good understanding of at least one or two of those technologies. Even when you do cyber, how does blockchain affect cyber? How does my cybersecurity affect blockchain? Can I make it more secure, or what can I do? Can I understand every facet of the blockchain? And with my cyber knowledge, can I make it more secure?
Or cybersecurity in the supply chain.
Or even with the IoT, or again, how can I make with these IoT devices? How can I make it more secure? How can I make it more reliable? Again, these are the ways. Again, I'm not in cybersecurity, but if I was, these are the ways I would think. But I'm in data science, and I think the way how am I going to use the data in the blockchain? How is this blockchain going to secure the data? How am I using drone technologies to get my data from a place or from a destination? So these are where I think when I come in terms of data science and all that. So you should be able to think in terms of cybersecurity on ways to implement these technology itself.
Yep. Yep. We got Dr. Phoenix on the panel.
Good evening, everyone.
Hey, good evening, bro.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, I came in as you all were talking and that came up and I initially came across those grants maybe about a year or two ago maybe, but they've been around for a while, but make a real long story short, again, these are things that I've discussed in the past about the use of blockchain and the use of specifically AI. And in particular, one particular problem within healthcare and certainly within clinical trials is actually finding participants. That is actually a big problem in clinical trials that is very difficult to find participants with, especially with like trials for cancer, cancer clinical trials for various new treatments or drugs or anything like that. Very difficult. And so one of the things that's been talked about, and I know there's a few projects out there where they're using AI to match patients up with clinical trials or ongoing clinical trials for whatever specific type of cancer, for example, that individual might have. And so, again, there's lots of opportunity out there, but these types of grants, I want to make something really clear. These are for experts. These are for folks who have doctorates, because typically that's who can only apply for these grants. You have to have a doctorate degree and you have to be able to write the grant proposal and all that stuff. So I think engineering cannabis, I think he's in a PhD program, so I'm sure he's learned about that.
Mathematics. I'm doing a PhD in mathematics, so
yeah,
I might be able
but
to.
nonetheless, you can partner up, and the good thing about this is that you doing a PhD in mathematics, you can partner up with a clinician with a doctorate. So that could have been an MD. Hell, it could have been maybe a pharmacist. Hell, a nurse with a doctorate, a PhD, or something like that. You could partner up with them, and you both could have wrote this grant proposal, and you can get in. Again, the first part of the clinical trial for the first one you read, I think it was 150, I believe, 150,000. Again, most clinical trials typically go in 3 to 4 phases, so each phase potentially lasts longer than the phase before it. And so, each one subsequently tends to give more. So again, these are things that can go on for years, and you get funding for years to do this. So, just pointing out there, and I thought this goes right in line with what Mike was reading about in the article and what he had been discussing.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. Because I think that is very interesting. I knew, there was a lot of talk about blockchain being implemented, from an NIH level and stuff like that. So you'll be surprised how many states are behind. Think about these southern states that, Arkansas and Mississippi, they don't have any sort of digital transformation process in place. Okay. Regardless of that, just because they're within a superpower doesn't mean that they're a superpower themselves. They don't have that sort of bandwidth, that human capital to really drive it locally. And so, these grants come out, and then the trickle down effect actually works. Maybe these smaller states, like Rhode Island and whatnot, they can adopt it. That they just don't have a process in place. And so, this becomes an example of, where these grants and stuff can come in, and some of the technology can be leveraged and actually trickle down to some of these smaller states.
Absolutely. And again, you don't really have people out here who are really experienced in blockchain, who have the knowledge and the expertise.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this this leaves a pretty big opening. You got a few brothers who are some experts you can partner with a clinician or someone like that, you know, and you guys can come together, write the grant, you know, potentially get funding for this. And, you know, again, you know, you ain't really got a whole lot of folks out here doing this research. So again, you get to make your mark, potentially made some breakthroughs, some discoveries, and probably some big money in the process. Never know.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. You know, I just saw $1 million on the other one. I said, oh, that sounds like something interesting. I understand that you have to have a bid. So
Yeah,
No,
I'm
I
gonna
mean,
definitely look for it. I'm gonna definitely look into it.
research can be very profitable if you know what you're doing. You know, again, like I said, one of my mentors, that's pretty much been her most of her career. And I mean, she does very well for herself. I mean, again, you know, if you have to like it, you know, it's not something that everyone can do. But again, in this particular area, you know, you just really don't have the experts like that. So I mean, it's pretty much wide open.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's been rumors just today talking about the Russians are trying to steal information from, you know,
Yeah, I was watching it on the BBC.
Twitter, the Twitter conspiracy with
which is
the
interesting
Russians.
because the Russians have their own you know biomedical research labs that, you know, they've been using for COVID, you know, and they've been coming up with their own solutions. So
I don't think people give the Russians a lot of credit,
no,
but
they
believe
don't.
it or not,
They say they're stealing from us, just trying to steal the COVID, you know, the vaccine.
yeah, I think they think Russia is like stuck in a Stone Age or some shit like
No,
that.
they're
You
not.
know,
They're not. They are heavy into IT. Heavy into
Yeah.
IT.
They've always been They've always been pretty technical. The Russians have been fairly advanced. They've been right up with us. You know, I mean, let's go back to the days of World War II and the bomb and all that. I mean, they were right. They were right with us, man. So at the end of the day, Russians are definitely not behind us, and we have a reputation. Well, we give them a certain type of reputation, but Russians are right up there with us, and they don't you know, and they don't play around either.
Yeah. Because, but in terms of COVID, you know, them stealing, you know, the patents for, you know, I mean,
It's ludicrous.
it seems outrageous that they would, because they already have their own biomedical research labs that have been working on COVID solutions. So, you
well,
know,
at the rate that the U.S. going, I wouldn't be. I think that'd be the last of my words.
Yeah. I would have to agree.
yeah. If anything, they bought masks from Russia. Remember, you know, Robert Kraft's plane for the Patriots went there and grabbed those masks from the Russians and brought them over here. I thought that was interesting. So
I guess that was a Trojan horse in their opinion.
yeah. But yeah, thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Dr. Phoenix, for submitting those NIH grants for blockchain. And please hit the like button if not already done so, and share the video if possible. And shalom to everyone.
Shalom.